Books presents Tock by Fern narrated by Laurel Merlington. Prologue. Texas. He was determined to get even with the people who put him behind bars. It didn't matter that he was guilty. He didn't care about that. All he cared about was revenge. 14 years of his life in prison had made him a very angry man, and he was hell-bent on tracking down the people who put him there. He was going to show them who was more cunning, more clever. He was going to make them wish they'd never laid eyes on him. But the 14 years weren't a total waste. The prison program encouraged the inmates to learn new skills, and he did. Now he was about to put them to work. He learned a lot about computers, programming, and best of all, 3D printing. All of those newly learned abilities were perfect companions to his past proficiencies. He wasn't going to let a miscalculation stand in his way. Not this time. One by one, he was going to show everyone just how talented he was. He knew he wasn't the capo mastermind of the crew, but between his skills and the others, their plans would come to fruition. With the help of his fraternity of former inmates, Darius was about to unleash the pent-up wrath he held for those who took away years from his life. He felt no remorse. The only thing that mattered was punishing the punishers. Virginia. Sometimes listening to other people's advice could land you in the slammer. But when you did something stupid on your own, well, you had no one else to blame. Leroy knew it was a long shot, but it could have changed everything for him. He could have gotten out of the dump he was living in. But it didn't happen the way he planned. There was an upside to all of it. He befriended, if you could call inmates friends, a dude who claimed he had some cash stashed away. Now that he was out, he could help his pal and make his fantasy come true. He just needed to wait until he got his orders. But he had to be careful. He didn't want to blow his parole again. Los Angeles. It was tough in the beginning for him to adjust to a more modest lifestyle. But that would end soon. Once his fellow former inmate arranged for the transfer of funds, he could leave the country. And that would be fine with him. Eventually he would work his way to a no-extradition country and live the life of luxury again. But first, Eric and his cohorts had a few things to do. As long as they stuck to the plan, life would be very different in a short time. Las Vegas. Lucky for him, he was able to move from Ohio to Nevada. He still had to register with the state, regardless which one he was in. He didn't think it was fair. Why him? Other ex-cons didn't have to register anything or anywhere once they finished their parole. Why is child pornography worse than bank robbery or murder? He didn't know the answer, but he was about to change his life and name for good. He patiently waited for the rest of his cronies to get out and get settled, and then the plan would roll. When they were in prison, he took a liking to the white-collar crime dude who had scammed millions. The guy was so out of his element that Benny almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The Gucci loafer fella needed some protection while in the slammer. He was a little too pretty, and he was an easy mark. Having played and coached football, Benny was large enough to become the guy's bodyguard, and the man promised him a bonus when they got out. They all had their own agenda, but the payoff would be the same for each of them. $50,000. Not bad for 2 weeks' work. Better than what Benny got in the slammer, $7.23 a month. It was almost unfathomable to calculate how much it was per hour. Benny was relatively certain there would be a few detours before he could become anonymous. At this point in his life, he knew there were always detours. What they would be, he did not know. All he knew was that he would be responsible for setting up the logistics. Chapter 1. Pinewood. It had been ages since Myra, Charles, Nicky, and Jack had dinner without the rest of the sisters. Annie and Fergus were visiting friends in Bar Harbor and wouldn't be back for a week. At first, Myra thought she might have separation anxiety. She and Annie were hardly ever apart. But Myra also welcomed the quiet time she would have with Charles. No other couple had their kind of unique relationship. It was truly unconditional love. Love, passion, understanding, support. Myra appreciated the way Charles always had her back, regardless of how mad and outrageous a mission was. Charles was always at the ready to do whatever it took to get the job done. And because of everyone's devotion to one another and the cause, whatever it takes became the slogan of the group. The group, an avenging selection of women who were cheated justice. Several years earlier, Myra's daughter was killed by a motorist as she was crossing the street. Myra's unborn grandchild was also lost. But the driver had diplomatic immunity and was secreted away and never brought to justice. For months, Myra anguished over the loss of her daughter and grandchild, until she spotted a newscast about a woman who was another victim of injustice. That's when Myra decided it was time someone took matters into their own hands. With the aid of her confidant and lover, Charles, her best friend, Annie, and all their connections, both legal and behind the scenes, the sisterhood was formed. Each woman brought her own unique skill to the group. When an injustice was at hand, so were the women of the sisterhood, who stopped at nothing, apart from murder, to avenge the sins perpetrated on innocent people. Though murder was never their goal, by the time the sisterhood finished their mission, the perpetrators just might wish they were dead. But tonight was going to be a quiet evening filled with several of Charles's culinary creations. Myra's adopted daughter Nicky had just finished a big case with her law firm, and Jack rested the prosecution's case in a different legal matter. Between their two schedules, they rarely had time to eat, let alone have a real meal with family. Myra had been looking forward to this evening for weeks, needling Charles about the menu. His signature dish was a crown roast with popovers, but Myra knew one should never use the American vernacular of Yorkshire pudding in front of him, not if you wanted a taste of one. But Charles had other menu ideas. He wanted to try something new. It just better be delicious. Myra playfully tapped her finger on Charles's collarbone. He immediately took her hand into his and kissed it. Myra pulled it away and gave him a playful pinch on the cheek. "My love, would I offer anything less than scrumptious?" Charles replied in his British accent, which occasionally morphed from traditional Cockney to West Midlands to RP, which is what one commonly heard on the BBC. Charles's background was a bit hazy. He was retired from MI6, but no one knew exactly why he could no longer enter the UK without stirring up the local authorities. Now he served the sisterhood with his contacts, networks, and expertise. Even though he was no longer welcome in his homeland, his former colleagues and allies were always willing to assist when requested. "I don't suppose you're going to tell me what you're planning?"
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.